I am Ryan Sipes with MyOwnLinux.com, and I'm here with Jos, or Jos, and then you can say your last name because I've already forgotten how to say it.
Poortvliet.
Poortvliet, okay.
Poortvliet, yeah.
And he is the community manager for OpenSUSE. Is there anything else we need to know about you, Jos?
God, what do you need to know about me? I have a really cute little dog, Popcorn, and of course a beautiful wife, Camilla. She's also active in KDE and open source frequently. Actually, last night she hung out with Lydia Pincher, who is also very active in the KDE community, currently busy with the Google Summer of Code, and with Claudia Rauch, who is, the KDE employee. So she was in good company. And otherwise, I'm active in OpenSUSE. Obviously, marketing, mostly writing, communication, getting the word out of what OpenSUSE does, what it's about.
Okay, excellent. That is really cool. My wife is undergoing the Linux challenge, and she's going to be forced to use Linux exclusively on her daily driver for a couple of weeks. So it's really cool to hear that your wife's already involved and getting into it.
Actually, I can't get her to, use OpenSUSE. She's just too married to Arch.
Oh, well, that's not a bad thing. I mean, Arch...
No, it's cool. It's cool. But now I do make fun of her when stuff doesn't work sometimes. I'm like, yeah, you should use OpenSUSE, then it would work out of the box.
So,
and of course, I get that back when something doesn't work.
Exactly. So we're obviously going to talk about OpenSUSE, but I really want to know what your first encounter was with Linux and what happened between now and then to get you where you're at today.
That's a long time ago, somewhere about 2000-ish, 2001 maybe. I was using Windows 98, which was, well, a disaster, as we all know. And I was looking for another operating system that would be stable and flexible, because I used to tweak things, and I liked doing that, theming stuff and all that. And if you did that with Windows 98, it got horribly unstable. And I just had gotten sick and tired of reinstalling it every, 6 to 9 months. So I tried out a couple of things. One of them was BIOS, which I thought was incredibly cool, but it had no applications. And I bumped into OpenSUSE, actually, well, SUSE back then, and KDE. I only remember that I used KDE 2.2 point something for a while, didn't really do what I wanted. Then I think I used Knoppix for a while, KDE 3.0, but 3.0 had most of the stuff I wanted, but it just wasn't there. So I actually started to use, release candidates and stuff, and Debian testing and unstable. And 3.1 had the features. It wasn't a terribly usable product, not easy and not terribly stable, I guess, but it had the features. So that was basically when I said bye Microsoft. And some of those days I removed Windows. Well, actually, I think I kept Windows 98 on my computer for a long time. And then at some point I had screwed up my Linux installation, tried to boot back into Windows, thinking, at least I have something installed that works. And it didn't work. So after that it was like, okay, I'm gonna pop in LiveCD and format the whole drive, and that's it for me.
That's how it always happens. You do like the trial by fire, and then you just stay there. So having brought that up, I was wondering, how is life nowadays? What really is starting to excite you in Linux land?
Yeah, a lot of the basic things are, done, right? I mean, if you really look at, back in 2000, 2001, you had to fight with your sound card, your video card, your everything. And now it's like, you plug in your webcam and it works. Oh, you might still have to actually select it in Google+, but that's it, right? If it doesn't do that automatically already. And yeah, it's almost boring. So on the hardware side, I used to compile my own kernels. Those times are gone. Why would I? So yeah, those things aren't terribly exciting. I think for me, the things that are exciting are doing the new things that we're doing now. I mean, for a long time, Linux was catching up, right? It's trying to get even with the proprietary competition, Apple or Microsoft, etc. I mean, around the time, about 6, 7 years ago, we had KDE 3.4, 3.3, 3.4, 3.5. By the time we were ahead of Microsoft. Then they came out with Vista, which basically was a step back in most areas, so at that time we were definitely ahead. Then of course we did KDE 4.0, which took a while to get back to stability. But overall, we've been doing new things for the last couple of years already, and that's really cool, I think. And it's not just desktop, obviously, it's everywhere. I mean, the kernel, it's not terribly sexy, I guess, for most people, but looking at what these guys are doing, there's quite a bit of innovation going on these days. I mean, the whole look at the new Android phones, right? They're coming with these 4.1 CPU configurations from NVIDIA, for example, or the big dot little from ARM, right? 4 heavy, strong, but power-hungry CPUs married with 4 slower, less power-hungry. How do you deal with that? From a point of software, that's really weird. You can't run Windows on that. It has no idea what to do with that. You have to put in time to think about it. It's new, uncharted territory, and they're doing it.
Yep.
Right? That's going on now, and I think, I obviously now I'm grabbing things from all over the ecosystem, but I think this is a general trend. I mean, OpenStack. Initially, you catch up with proprietary competition. Now they're starting to do new things. It's with Apache, it's everywhere. I mean, not in every area, I mean, in the office we're still not doing a lot of innovation, I suppose, but in a lot of other areas we are, and that's cool. I like to see. I mean, GNOME is an example, right? What they're doing with GNOME Shell. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of the end result. It doesn't really work for me very well, but they are innovating, and it is really cool to see. I think, and they are definitely pioneering some concepts that are really interesting. So I think that's the exciting thing. And now we moved on from getting stuff working to doing cool stuff, new stuff. That's nice.
I do wonder what your opinion is then, because you touched on it briefly. Linux has really etched out a place in mobile here recently, and in the form not only of Android but some other platforms as well. And I was wondering how you feel specifically about Android and then about mobile in general. I really, lately there's been a lot of hubbub about, Ubuntu bringing on a mobile platform, as well as a few other players, Sailfish OS and the like. But I'm wondering, from your point of view, what are you interested in as far as the mobile space is concerned, and what, I guess, do you see Linux being, I mean, it's already the dominant player in mobile through Android, but do you see more distros, quote unquote, mobile distributions of Linux really catching on and taking hold?
Well, the answer there is obviously I have no clue, but by God, I hope so. Because I share a great preference for collaborative development models with a lot of other free software people. I mean, give me a sec. I'm gonna let the dog in because he's gonna keep scratching the door. Come here, you little monster. Yes, I love you. You're a sweetie pie. Okay, that's popcorn. Bye, dog.
I saw him on your Google Plus page on the big ol', I don't know what they're called anymore, but the wallpaper on your background, and I didn't know if that was your dog.
It is. That's popcorn. Anyway, so as I said, I share a preference for collaborative development models with a lot of people in the free software community. I mean, I come from KDE, which I think is probably the most bottom-up, most open community from the big ones. I mean, it's really bordering on anarchy. Organized chaos. and it's obviously it's both a strength and a limitation, right? I mean, it has good and bad sides. But I do appreciate the chaos, because out of that come a lot of interesting new things. I mean, there's stuff that I remember during the time that Vista was being developed, and we would really see features crop up there in the previews that we had introduced several months before. And I still don't know if it was really because Microsoft looked at some of the stuff we were doing, but it was damn peculiar sometimes.
Yeah.
And even before that, the stuff that KD pioneered with network transparency, the Kio slaves, I don't know how much you've played with them, but realize that they were there 10 years ago. And they can do stuff that no other desktop can, proprietary or open. So there's some real interesting stuff that was done there, and is still being done. I mean, the way they're trying to unify, the different devices. I mean, I know both Microsoft and Android are a little bit going in that direction, but the only project, as far as I can tell, that has a real unified vision when it comes to different form factors, that's the KD Plasma team. I mean, those guys, and they've had that for a very long time. It's not new, they've been doing it already for a long time. They have an idea if you can build one UI framework and then make it adapt to different devices. I mean, that's really cool stuff. And quite unique, because everyone else is just building basically different UIs, in some cases on different toolkits, for different devices, with all the problems that come with that, because then of course people start to develop devices that are in between, and you get the phablets. Okay, are we going to put a tablet UI on this or a phone UI? I don't know. Oh, you have a device that you can click into a keyboard. Okay, what is it now? Is it a tablet? Is it a laptop? And what if you can then click that tablet into a television? You need a media center. Are you going to build an entirely new UI for that? I mean, the tablet UI isn't going to work. I mean, nobody's doing this right, as far as I can tell, except for the Plasma team, and that's cool. I mean, they're not done yet, but they have the infrastructure to do it, and that's so. That's kind of that's where I'm coming from, right? I see people, if you let them do things, if you open things up, you see them do awesome stuff. Now, this is not how Android works, at least not Android itself. The apps is reasonably open, but Android itself, it used to be developed really closed. But Google realized that, there's a reason why the free software world have been collaborating and why Linux became big. So they got the point of, it's good to work upstream in the kernel, so they're getting stuff in the kernel now. But in most other areas, they're not doing a lot with working with other communities. WebKit, they are, although they just forked it, but hey. it's still, there they were collaborating, and they're developing it in the open. But the core of Android is not, the UI is not, most of the applications are not, and that's, well, I think aside from being, unfortunate for people who want to hack on that stuff, it's also a loss. I mean, could be better, I think. I'm not saying it's easy to do collaborative development. It's very hard. That's why there are companies who give up on it. Companies that used to try and work really collaborative and didn't work, and okay, let's drop it. Nokia as an example. Canonical seems to be a little bit going in that direction. They're tightening control. So, it's hard. And sometimes stuff doesn't work exactly as you want. But on the other hand, I think it's worth, the benefits. I mean, it's why Linux works in the first place.
Right.
So, for the phone space, I see a downside from Android because it is not as open as I'd like it to be. But on the other hand, I mean, hey, if I have a choice, obviously, between any of the other platforms, the bigger ones, Well, the biggest ones are probably like Bada and what is it?
Symbian.
Symbian, exactly. I mean, they're all way more closed.
Yeah.
Obviously, iOS is as close as it gets. So, and just like Google does, by the way, and iOS, what's being done by Apple on iOS also partially contributes back to free software. They're essentially not that incredibly much different from Android, which again is sad. I think there's room for improvement there. Maybe it'll come, maybe not. I'm kind of hoping, but not holding my breath for that.
Yeah.
That wouldn't be healthy. So I'm kind of have my hope indeed set on other players. I mean, Sailfish, Migo. I mean, I have, you know, the N9. I think it's a friggin' awesome phone. It just would need a faster CPU, and I keep using it. The UI is just wonderful. Of course, it is also like Android. It's not terribly open, although it was developed in a more open fashion than Android, as far as I can tell. So let's see what Sailfish is going to do. But honestly, Canonical might be, you know, from the Linux distros, the one that has probably the closest and most, you know, top-down organized development. But in the phone space, they're really an open player, speaking. So I'm quite happy with the Ubuntu phone, and if they manage to make it big, hey, awesome. You know, it's too bad that they're forking, you know, Linux infrastructure left and right. I mean, I think that's going to bite them in the ass, which is sad. Because, again, I like Ubuntu phone. I think it's good. Sorry. But, yeah, I mean, they're moving to Qt, which I think is a smart move, because that has become kind of an industry standard on mobile devices outside of Android, of course. So that's a move because it allows them to save or to save some resources. Obviously, GTK is just not very suitable for this kind of stuff. They're probably going to move the desktop to Qt, which again I think makes sense. But Qt might also be something where they might become a little more collaborative. I know there are some Canonical folks involved talking to the KD Plasma guys, because Qt has this one issue. QML is awesome, but it doesn't have a toolkit. So everybody has been making their own toolkits, which is of course suboptimal. It's a lot of work. It's never really good because, you know, all the time there are other things that you need to take into consideration. And building a toolkit is not easy, right? Talking about all the buttons, you have to take all the languages into account. They have to, you know, the left-right thing. Then there's a usability thing, accessibility. It's a complicated thing. So there is actually a chance that, you know, the several companies that are now building their own toolkits, Canonical, BlackBerry, the Plasma team, and of course, you know, DGS/Qt, there's a chance that they'll work together, which would be really nice. And if that works out, well, that would be, I guess, points for everyone.
Yeah, I agree. Now, I wanted to shift gears because I don't know if you've realized this, but I've seen this trend. I started really using Linux full-time about 2005 or 2006. And back then, there weren't a lot of celebrities in the Linux space. But recently, there's been a few people who have really, I guess, become popular as Linux celebrities. And I wanted to point out that recently, Brian Lunduke, I don't know if you follow him, but he posted you as one of the Linux celebrities. And
me?
Yes, you. And okay. Among some other people, of which included Linus Torvalds. So you're in the top echelon of Linux celebrities, according to Brian Lunduke. And I was wondering if you'd felt that at all. I know that's totally shifting gears away from the software, and I'll get back to that, but it's just something really interesting that I found because, you know, you and we spoke very briefly talking about a project, you know, in OwnCloud, but it wasn't it was kind of interesting because I see where he's coming from, because about a couple months after we had spoken, I picked up a Linux magazine and saw an interview with you in it, and I was like, whoa, is that the same guy I talked to before? Like, but I was wondering if you'd felt that at all, or if you'd even realized that you had I guess some fans that were following you. And
this is really new, to be honest. I had no idea. It's well, I guess it's charming, but no, I wasn't really aware that he would put me in that envelope. No, I had no idea. I mean, obviously, the free software community has a interesting thing, I think, with well, call them heroes then, or popular people, but I mean, it's a pretty small community. I mean, you often, if you're a little more, if you've been involved for a longer time, let me put it that way, you actually know most of the people, or at least a lot of people. I mean, if I go to a conference, I almost always meet a bunch of people I know. Obviously, I've been going to quite a few conferences as part of my job, so that helps, but still. And I guess, I don't know, I mean, for me, and I think that goes for most people, you still interact really easy with people because it's not such a huge group of people, right? And that's when you get this stuff like, you get an interview with a journalist here or there. Okay, cool. But at least it doesn't give me the feeling that I'm a celebrity, I mean, just trying to get stuff done that I think is cool or important or,
Right.
But yeah, it's interesting.
Well, you mentioned the community being smaller, and I kind of got that feeling too, just because recently I've been contributing very scarcely to multiple projects. But I wanted to know, from an outsider's perspective, even though I've been running Linux for quite some time, I haven't been very involved in the community, and so I think, and a lot of my friends who are also big fans of open source and they want to get involved, they don't really ever, there's not really, they go to the websites and maybe they talk to some people, but they always ask, like, what's the best way to get involved? And I don't really have a clear answer for them, but I figured you might have a good answer for them as to where they can get involved, especially people who don't really have a lot of coding experience. Maybe they have, some programming experience, but they still want to contribute. What would you say to them, and where could they really help out? Yeah, at least even in the OpenSUSE and KDE projects.
Well, I think the most difficult thing in any community when you want to get involved is to actually get something done. But as soon as you have, for all intents and purposes, you're in. So I can, tell you about specific sites or talking to specific people, but in the end, the barrier is to get something done. So I think that's what I would recommend. If you want to contribute something in a certain community, look for something that you think needs to be done, and try to do it. I mean, obviously that's not going to be easy, and you're going to have to figure out how to do it, etc. But it is, I think, what pretty much everyone in free software had to do at some point. And that's this thing of the typical basement geek thing, sitting down and just attacking something head on, finding out, looking for documentation and asking people. I mean, obviously you can and should, but as soon as you actually have a patch, and if you don't even know how to make a patch, just hack up the C files until it works, and if it works for you, and then just go to the mailing list and say, look, I made this. And then of course they'll tell you, well, this is wrong, and that is wrong, and that is wrong. But they'll also tell you how to fix it, and they'll help you get your code in. And once you have it in, that's where you want it to be, right? Then you're there. So instead of asking like, how can I get involved? It's kind of the wrong question. The question should be, how do I get this piece of code that I made? How do I get it in?
Right.
Because that's where you need to be. Just go for that specific thing. Just get something in. And once you have something in, the biggest barrier is done. You've jumped over it. And then it's, I wouldn't say smooth sailing from there on, but you're in. You can ask for help. People will help you. I mean, they're a lot more likely to help you when they see you actually do something or did something than to help you when you talk. Because honestly, talk is cheap. There are a lot of people asking questions and asking, how do I get involved, and not actually doing much. So if you simply manage to do something, you get all the help you need.
Yeah, and I think that answers the question. And it's not too far from what typically I say to them. Just find a place to contribute and start contributing. And I'm sure that you knew that this was inevitable, but I wanted to talk about Clyde. It's gotten a lot of attention lately. But I also wanted to ask where, I guess, you guys got the idea to go ahead and start on Clyde, or if it was just one idea. Or I know it's kind of been floating, a lightweight KDE has been floating around for a while, but honestly, using the newest version of OpenSUSE with KDE, it's fast. It's really fast, and I'm not running Clyde. I'm just, running just base KDE, and I threw it on a virtual machine a little while ago with less than 2 gigs of RAM and not all that much power, and it ran beautifully. It ran better than any other distro I've run in that environment. So I'm wondering, where did it come out of, and I guess what's your favorite stuff about it? Just tell me about it.
It's about more than just resources. I mean, this is something, as I said in my blog, I've been talking to people for years. Sometimes, you meet people in and outside the KDE community, and they're like, look, I tried to set this up, and it works, but every 2 weeks I come home, and I look at the system, that I set up for my, grandpa. The taskbar is completely screwed up. He has 3 empty panels, and it's a mess. They call me twice a day. How do I upload a picture to Flickr? And I have to walk them through it. And this idea of let's try to make something really simple. Of course, it's not completely new and unique. GNOME tried to make something really simple, and then, in time you have to add all the features, and at the end of GNOME 2, it was still had a lot of features, let me put it that way.
Right.
So, we always said to each other, talking about this and trying, Frank Karliczek, for example, the guy who started OwnCloud, he tried to do a project of making a simple open PC and selling that and trying to generate some income, which he then could use to improve KDE further. It didn't work out. But the idea behind it was have a simple, easy to use and pre-install KDE, which I think is a really good idea. And we always talked about this, various people. And every time it was like, it should be more traditional, it should be a little simpler, a little lighter, but doing it, that's a big step. And finally Will said, look, I'm doing this for a hack week, I'm just gonna do it. I was like, okay, I'll join if there's anything I can actually do. And he said, yeah, sure. So he gave me stuff to do, and I'm not a very technical person at all, but I dove in, and we've actually managed to do some stuff. So where does it come from? It comes from the idea that, look, KDE is incredibly flexible. It can be configured to do anything, but you have to do that. And every person who uses KDE always says, look, I first configure everything first time you set it up, you spend X amount of time to configure stuff. Now, of course, part of that you can't solve. I mean, everybody configures it differently. But there are some things that could be improved out of the box. And that's, well, what we're aiming for. It's going to be really difficult because a lot of that, seems simple. I had this huge discussion on Google Plus with somebody who was like, the system settings is a bloody mess. It's such a simple thing. Why don't you fix it? I said, look, it's not simple. It might seem simple, but system settings is basically configuration models of applications, of the configuration modules of different applications and components in KDE. It is owned by I don't know how many different people. They all have different ideas about how it should work. They all have different goals and priorities. And that last point means they might not be interested at all in spending time in improving these modules. So fixing them requires, well, of course you could sit down and do all the work, but that's a bit problematic because they're in charge. So you have to convince them that these improvements are actually worth it. So the guy then said, well, isn't that a stupid way of setting it up? And I said, well, it's inherent to who we work as KDE. This is the bottom-up way of working, our decentralized, way of giving people independence and control, who does the work, decides, etc. I mean, it's who we are. Changing that means changing who we are, and we wouldn't have made it where we are today without our way of working. So that's one of the downsides of the way KDE works. And, well, we're trying to solve that, of course. I mean, the fact that it's difficult doesn't mean you shouldn't try. But the fact that it's difficult is, of course, one of the reasons why it took so long for someone to really start on it. And I'm not even gonna, say that I even think we can actually solve it. At least I think we can do some stuff. But really solving it, it's gonna take time and it's gonna be really hard. But I've got some hope. I mean, Will is determined and he's good. I mean, he can do this stuff.
So I have one question and then we'll go on to my last question. The question I have is, I know that you're over in Berlin, correct?
Mm-hmm.
I'm in the middle of the U.S. I'm in Kansas, of all places. And I was curious because as an outsider looking over at Europe in general, I see that it seems like open source and Linux is a lot more popular over there than it is over here. And I was wondering if that was true, or if that's just me, thinking across the pond it's better. It's like
always greener at the other side.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, I think I can answer that question not with a real black and white yes or no. I mean, I've been to quite a few of the Linux fests in the US, and there are quite a few, and there are a lot of people going there. So there's a lot of stuff going on in the US. But the US tends to be a little more spread out than Europe in general, right? This is with, well, almost everything. I mean, you guys drive to the grocery store, I cross the street. I mean,
yeah.
So I think that does make a difference, especially in how it's perceived. I mean, in your place, you might have the impression that there are very few, if any, Linux users around. But if you start to organize a monthly meetup, you might discover there are hundreds. Yeah. So, in Europe that I think happens a little more. I mean, there are other differences as well. I mean, especially Germans are people who do a lot of volunteer work, and the same goes for Norway and Sweden and Finland. Well, when you're a geek, that volunteer work often happens to be in open source,
Right.
I mean, Richard Stallman said this once, people asked him, you're trying to make the world better, then why don't you go to Africa and build schools? He said, give me a hammer and I'll make a mess. I mean, I'm paraphrasing here, but he said, I'm a programmer. If I want to make the world a better place, I should use the skills I have.
Right.
And I think a lot of people do that. And in the US, well, first of all, you guys actually have companies where you have no days off, if I understand that correctly. That's already quite different from Europe, where you have a lot of time off. So it's a different work ethic, I guess, that makes a difference there. And also, I mean, it's not like there's not a lot of volunteer work being done in the US. I mean, there is a lot. I don't know, maybe there's simply less of a tradition to do that, for geeks in open source. I don't know. But it might very well just be, the spread out thing as well. I think it's probably multiple things. I don't think the difference is as big as it might seem from distance.
Yeah, I guess that could just be a perception thing, but I do really think that just talking to some other people in open source that there's a lot of activity over there that here might be just in select areas, whereas it seems like there, there's efforts in multiple places, things popping up every day.
But it's about people, eh? And this is the thing. A lot of people think, free software is about the technology and all that. And of course, those things are important, but it's the same as in business in the end. People are really important. And once you have a couple of people, or even just one, building up something locally, being, inspiring to other people, then around that person develop something. And that's what you see. I mean, in OpenSUSE, we have a couple of really active communities. The Greek community is incredibly active. Why is that? Well, there's one guy, Kostas, and he's just awesome. And then that attracts other people, he's like a gravity well. And that builds up an incredibly active local community. Why doesn't that exist in Slovenia? I don't know. There might not be a Kostas there, and then it doesn't build. So this is the same in the US, I think. I mean, events like Scale, where do they come from? In the end, if you go back, it starts with one guy or a few people in a room who say to each other, come on, let's do this. And they do it, and that attracts people. And then it seems like, hey, there's a pocket of activity. Yeah, sure. And that keeps growing. And that's how it works.
Yeah.
And everything being a little closer, I guess, makes it easier to build these pockets. Yeah.
That sounds very probable. That seems like that's probably the case. And so it's a good thing that we're having this discussion, because then maybe somebody should be like, well, maybe I should bring my friends in together and we should do something.
And that's how it works, right? Personal relationship, seeing each other. A lot of people really believe that, free software, it's all online and you communicate by email. Yes, you do, but without the meetings, it wouldn't be half as successful. I mean, those meetings, conferences, but also smaller meetings, they are very crucial. I mean, it's social ties that keep us together. I always say, people get involved because of technology, and they stay involved because of people.
Yeah.
I really believe that. It's crucial, the social aspect.
Yeah, I'd definitely be inclined to agree with you there, because whenever I initially, even started using Linux and open source software, it was, like you said, about the technology. But once I got brought into the community, I realized that, this was something that was worthwhile, and that...
Exactly. It transcends the technology, but before you see that, you have to, get in touch.
Right, right. So this is my last question, and it's just kind of a fun one, but what software are you currently running on your machine? Obviously, I would assume OpenSUSE and probably KDE, but how's your rig set up, and what do you find what apps and applications and so on do you find yourself gravitating towards right now?
Well, I recently put in another 16 gigs of RAM because I'm an extremely multitasker. I usually have 6 virtual desktops, and each has several file browsers open usually, and each of them might have multiple tabs. I mean, it's crazy, I know. Web browser, each of the 6 desktops probably has on average 15 tabs. I mean, I keep everything open, you know, and when I switch tasks, I switch to another virtual desktop and do the work there.
Exactly.
So there are consoles open. I use Chromium, Firefox, and Reconq, all of them at fun, usually. Each of them for certain things, you know. I mean, Chromium, if you keep it running overnight, it'll just keep growing because, you know, those guys think, hey, you know, every tab is a process. So, you know, people close the tabs and then, you know, memory leaks are not important because we close the process. So if you keep it running overnight and suddenly there is one tab that is using 2 gigs of memory, then yeah, think of that. So, you know, I have to close Chromium every night because otherwise when I come back it's killed or something else got killed. Firefox is a lot better in that regard, but it's a little less smooth, I think. So, you know, and Recon for smaller things, it feels faster for certain more basic websites. And Kmail, I use a lot of email. And for all my writing, I use Kate. I have like, I don't know, 50 documents open, all text files, of course, in Kate. And then there's the occasional LibreOffice writer and all that stuff. And Calligra Office, I use it too. I mean, yeah. Right now I'm using another user account, but normally I have like, well, 7-8 gigs of applications, just pure apps. Yeah, it's well, I suppose.
I know where you're coming from. I just had to build a new machine to keep up with the way that I work, and it sounds like you're very similar. So go ahead and just tell people who tune in where they can find you and where they can follow you online.
Well, I'm on Twitter, Jos Poortvliet, yeah, first and last name connected. The same on Facebook, the same on, well, blog.jospoortvliet.com. Google Plus, same. So look for that if you want to connect and, you know, talk to me. I mean, hey, cool. You know, might be a superstar, but it's a tiny community, so I don't mind, you know.
Excellent, excellent. And you can follow me over at Ryan Lee Sipes on Twitter and plus Ryan Sipes on Google Plus.